All right, you guys, I want to go over how bureaucracies are organized. So this is pages 476 to 480. And this is, if you want to notice, if you haven't already, certain terms are bolded. So those are words that you definitely should know, be able to define, be able to use all of those good things. So one thing to note that in general, there are four types of bureaucracies: cabinet departments, regulatory agencies, government corporations, and independent executive agencies. So let's go ahead and go through those. The cabinet departments, you guys have got a little experience with on those with your project that you guys did. So they're each headed by somebody called a secretary, with the exception of the Department of Justice, which is headed by the Attorney General. So otherwise, they're all called secretaries. They are all chosen by the president and are approved by the Senate. Beneath the secretaries are people called undersecretaries, and then deputy undersecretaries and assistant secretaries. So again, we see that hierarchy within the system. Each department manages specific policy areas and has its own budget and staff. All right, so those are all really important things. Now, how do they get work done? It's done in their bureaus. So again, we've got that term there. Sometimes these bureaus are called things like service or office or administration. So just note that, and it's okay if you don't memorize them all exactly perfect. No one's going to get hung up on that. All right, so I've got some numbers here. These are honestly from a little bit old because they're from your textbook, but just so you're aware of them. So from 1970 to 1995, Department of Health and Human Services was the largest federal department in dollars spent, although the Department of Defense had more employees. So I just found that information. I just thought I'd include it because I thought it was a little bit interesting. But also what's interesting is, of course, 1995, there is no Department of Homeland Security. So that was the most recently added cabinet. When this country first started, we only had three. We had Secretary of State, Treasury, and of War, which is now called Defense. But it's expanded over time as needed, and Homeland Security was added last after 9/11. All right. The second part of this has to do with the regulatory agencies. So each of the independent regulatory agencies has responsibility for some sector of the economy. They also have responsibility for making and enforcing rules, and they are designed to protect the public interest. And they also judge dispute over those rules. So they've got a lot going on with them. They are sometimes called the alphabet soup of the American government because most of these agencies are known by their initials. So, for example, you've got the Interstate Commerce Commission, which is generally referred to as the ICC. You've got the Federal Reserve Board, which is known as the FRB. You've got the National Labor Relations Board, known as the NLRB. Federal Communications Commission is the FCC. Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC. So hopefully I could hear all those letters carefully there. The alphabet soup kind of reminds me of the New Deal a little. And some of those are New Deal programs like the SEC. All right, each of these agencies is governed by a small commission, and which is appointed by the president for fixed terms of office and confirmed by the Senate. Regulatory commission members cannot be fired by the president. One thing to note too is that critics claim the close connection between the regulators and the industries they regulate has meant that agencies have become the captives of industry. So that's an important note, is that there is a link between these two things, and some people definitely have questions about that. All right. So that is that little part there. Now, I do want to add, there's nothing in my little blurby book here about the interest groups, but I do want to remind you guys of the power of the interest groups that are working for a particular interest. And those are going to provide some oversight where we've got a little bit of this crossover between government and corporation. So interest groups are going to remain really important in this case as well. Okay, the third organizational tactic has to do with government corporations. So what does that mean? What a government corporation does is it provides a service that could be provided by the private sector, and they charge for their service. So for example, we've got a few like Amtrak. Amtrak is something that is oftentimes seen as a private company. However, that is a government corporation. The FDIC, or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is the agency that insures your deposits into the bank. That is a New Deal program. Another New Deal program is the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, which provides power across the Tennessee River Valley. So, and it still does today. So, in some parts, some of it has changed hands, but those are just some examples. So, Tennessee Valley Authority is giving power, selling power, that kind of deal spiel, and that is a something that, for example, PG&E here in California will do. So just to keep a note that we do have government provided services. The biggest one, and it keeps coming up, is the postal service. When I was a kid, I don't even think we had UPS or FedEx. I don't really remember that, and I know they're relatively new, although I don't know. FedEx started by shipping money. I would listen to a podcast on that, but I don't recall the date. We'd have to Google it. But well, what I'm getting at here is that those two, I think because of online shopping in the last 20 years, have just exploded and infiltrated the market so much. But USPS, the Postal Service, is a government agency that basically does provide a lot of the same services. All right, the last way that bureaucracies are organized has to do with independent executive agencies. So they are essentially everything else, okay? Everything else. So they're not part of the cabinet, they do not have regulatory functions, and they just pretty much do specialized functions. That's what they are performing. Their administrators are typically appointed by the president and serve at his pleasure, which means he can fire them whenever he wants, or she. One day we'll have a female president. Some examples include the NASA. Okay, and NASA's role has changed over the years, but people who work for NASA, the head of NASA, etc., the top dogs there, are appointed by the president. Another example could be the National Science Foundation. Okay, so we've got these examples of different kinds of people who work for the government in these other roles. They have specialized functions. The head of NASA isn't going to, switch gears and go work for the TVA like he is a space guy. So just to keep that in mind. Okay, that is this little part right here. Hopefully not too long. Thanks for listening.